All right, I'm giving myself a bit of a challenge here. I'm starting with Vancouver. And I'm going to do this with every team. Yep. And these are my favorite players that have played for every team. With Vancouver, it's 15. When I get to Pittsburgh and Montreal and teams that I may not necessarily cheer for, it may be more difficult. Nah, it won't be. The one thing I've done my best to make sure is true of me as a hockey fan is that whether I cheer for a team or not doesn't necessarily affect whether or not I like a player, whether or not a player is one of my favorites or not. I know that's different from how a lot of hockey fans and sports fans are in general. Like, you're not going to hear a lot of Giants fans talking about how great that member of the Dallas Cowboys is. And I'm talking New York Giants, not San Francisco Giants. They probably don't care. But, that kind of thing. Whereas a Montreal fan, you can appreciate a player on the Bruins without people going, wait, what? And vice versa. As a Bruins fan, I can appreciate somebody in Montreal and not have a, really? Shannon's praising a guy from Montreal? Yeah, it happens. So, 15 favorite Canucks, and this is all time. And this is tough. So, honorable mention to Elias Pettersson. That's how tough this is. Honorable mention to Alex McGillney, Gino Ojic, Tiger Williams, right? So yeah, this is a tough list to come up with, and that's why it's 15. I had intended on doing 10, and I was like, no, if I just do 10, I'm leaving these guys out. So all right, these are the 15. I'm having flashbacks to History of the World Part 1. I hold my hands, the 15, smash, the 10 commandments. All right, number 15. Sammy Salo, who got hurt regularly, but when he played, he was an excellent defenseman, and I never had complaints about his game, so at a time where I was very likely to yell at the television, I didn't really yell at him. I really didn't. So, yeah, Salo, excellent. Oh, honorable mention to Brendan Morrison as well. Morrison's not on the list. It's tough to get on this list. This is a team I've cheered for about 40 years, so it is tough to get on this list. But yeah, Salo's number 15. Number 14. Now, it's possible if I do this list again in 5 years, Besser's either higher up or he's not on it. Besser, there's some divided opinions on Besser. I still think he has the best pure shot of any player I've seen play for Vancouver since Pavel retired. But, well, since Pavel left, he retired well after leaving Vancouver, but you know what I mean. He's the best shot I've seen on a Vancouver jersey since Pavel. Pettersson has a great shot as well, but I think Besser's just on a whole other level. I don't know what happened to him this season. We'll see if he comes back next year, if he makes that next step. Part of the reason I'm saying I don't know if he's going to be on the top 15 the next time I do this kind of thing, if that was 5 years down the road, is he still a Canuck in 5 years? Because if he has that uneven progression, and if the Canucks do start taking that next step into being contenders, and I think they'll at the very least be a playoff team with some more certainty to that next season. This year they were kind of on the edge. I think next year they take that next step. It's been a very slow progression, but is Besser part of that picture long term? That's where I don't have a crystal ball right now. Number 13. Wish I did. Yeah, number 13. I remember when Dave Babich arrived in Vancouver in a three-way deal, and it turned out to be an absolute steal of a deal. He provided the veteran leadership that the early 90s Canucks needed on that blue line. Really, honestly, and again, for the defenseman on this list, it's how often did I yell at the TV? And if I really sort of didn't yell at the TV over something boneheaded move that the player made, they'd probably end up on this list. Honorable mentions to Stan Smeal, as well as Thomas Gradine, Darcy Rhoda, Garth Butcher. Yeah, there's a lot of honorable mentions with the Canucks. There really is. And guaranteed in the comment section, somebody's going to mention somebody else. Well, where's your honorable mention for this guy? Number 12. Yeah, I'll go with this guy, number 12. Tony Tanney was their goal scorer at a time when they didn't really have goal scorers in Vancouver. Even during the 80s, when everybody's scoring goals, Vancouver was challenged with that. Not a lot of star power. Tony Tanti was their first ever 40 goal scorer. He did it a couple of times, and he was my favorite player on some of those teams. Uh, and then he moved on after his 40 goal seasons were done. I always kind of had hoped that it would come back to bite them when he got traded. I thought, man, I hope Tanny goes somewhere else and scores 50, and it just didn't happen. But Tony Tanny is one of those guys that when we have these throwbacks and we do the 50 years and we talk about Tanty's kind of got forgotten in my eyes. Like it's just I don't know, it's kind of weird. 40 goal scorer and nobody talks about it. Sort of like Patrick Sundstrom's not on the board. People are going to talk about that. Yeah, Patrick Sundstrom also honorable mention. He was passing the puck to Tanny a lot in some of those seasons. So, yeah, Tanny is off the board. Or on the board, off the book. Let's see. Well, he's technically still in there. I've just checked him off. Number 11, so this is the last one outside the top 10. Before we get into the real meat and potatoes of this. I cannot have him in there. Cannot have him in there either. All right. Number 11. Late 80s, early 90s. The Vancouver Canucks had Doug Lidster and Garth Butcher. That was their defense. Those guys got worked right into the ground. By the time Garth Butcher got traded to St. Louis, it felt like Vancouver had already used up as much mileage on him as possible. Yeah, you drive a car into the ground and then you sell it off for a profit. That's kind of what the Canucks did with Butcher. Lidster to less of an extent, but he played a ton. And I always felt bad for Lidster and Butcher because they were it. That was the Canucks defense. So that's why Butcher's an honorable mention. Lidster's on the board. Not top 10. Apologies to Doug Lidster if he's watching this, but he still made the top 15, which considering how many Canuck names are going through my head, like Brendan Morrison, Todd Bertuzzi, also honorable mentions. I know, Bertuzzi is a guy that everybody remembers the Moore incident, but he was the best power forward in the game for a while there, and honestly, Bertuzzi was a fantastic player. It is a shame that gets overshadowed, but he's not in the top 15. Number 10. Okay, do I go with the clutch goal scorer at number 10? You know what? I'll go with this guy at number 10. I know it's going to throw people off. Pavel Bure was the most exciting player the Canucks ever had. And Bure, if I was doing most skilled Canucks, Bure's probably number 1. Pettersson would be on this list too, right? So Bure was a fantastic player. And early on, I loved him. But at some point, the physical part of his game started to kind of dissipate. It was like as the money started to roll in, as his contract got bigger. That's just how it felt. That's how it felt to me as a fan, and I know there were other fans that I talked to regularly who felt the same way. That Bure came into the NHL with that physical game, the goal scoring, the speed, and then the goal scoring and the speed were still there, but the physical side kind of fell off. And then there were questions about his effort as well on some nights. And whether or not he wanted to be there. We know now what the problem was with Bure, that he was having problems with management. But he was not one of my favorite players. By the time he left, he wasn't one of my favorite players. I remember after the Bure trade, everybody not being happy about it. I thought, well, at least it's over. Was my opinion of the Bure trade. It was like, okay, that's done. What we got back, we can look over later, but at least it's finished. So yeah, Bure comes off the board at 10. Again, if this was most talented Canucks, he'd be much higher than 10, obviously. Number 9. Number 9. Do I go with him here? Yeah, I'll go with him here. So on my list of favorite Canucks, Marcus Naslund gets on there. He's number 9. Naslund was their captain through some of their best times, and he took ownership when they lost. So while everybody quoted his "we choked" and isn't that funny, I applauded him for it. I applauded him for having the courage to say, you know what, yeah, we choked. We had a chance to go all the way there, and we blew it, and we're sorry. And Marcus Naslund got my respect for that, and continued this tradition of Swedish players being at the forefront for the Vancouver Canucks. Like Alex Edler, an honorable mention on this list. So yeah, Naslund at number 9. it's a shame that he didn't get a cup ring because he was the most talented player in the league for at least a year and a half period. There wasn't a really high peak, or was a high peak. It just didn't last very long. That's the peak term. He it was weird. It was like that West Coast Express had lightning in a bottle for about a year and a half, and then it never really came back. You would see Crawford trying to throw them back together here and there, and that magic never quite came back. So number 9, Marcus Naslund. Number 8. Yeah, I can throw him here. Now, I'm not talking about Greg C. Adams, Canuck legend. I'm talking about Gus Adams, who has the same first and last name. Greg Adams, Gus, as he came to be known after Greg C. Adams had come through the Vancouver system. He didn't play for Vancouver very long, but we had both Greg Adams in the lineup at the same time. It was so weird. So for this Greg Adams, he was a clutch goal scorer. He was a 30-goal guy, and I loved his consistency. I loved his effort. He did get hurt. Not going to lie, he did get hurt. And then when he left, he went to Dallas, and I was very grateful that he went to Dallas, and he did pretty darn well in Dallas as well. Greg Adams was just one of my all-time favorite players, and yeah, so he gets number 8 on the board. Number 7, and I'll go with this guy at 7. And again, it's a tough list. Trevor Linden at number 7. Linden, of course, he was a captain, and he famously or infamously was shipped off by Keenan before he gets brought back by Burke. And the Linden trade, honestly, was actually a pretty good deal made when he was shipped to the Islanders. But bringing him back was a great PR move, which also was a great move for the Canucks. And Trevor Linden should have been a Canuck throughout his whole career. And in his prime, he was every bit as good as, I would say, Bo Horvat is right now for the Canucks. Like, he could score. He was a good scorer. He got converted to center from wing. And the first year that he was converted to center, there were some people who wanted him to stay on the wing. Said this is a bad idea. The Canucks shouldn't convert him to center. And then it worked. It just clicked shortly thereafter. And he's still one of those heart and soul guys for the Canucks. Number 6. Yeah, I'll put him at number 6. So the picture of Trevor Linden, heart and soul, after 94 was done. This one on the patch here, Kirk MacLean. Kirk MacLean dragged the Canucks to that Stanley Cup final. Had an amazing Game 1 in the Stanley Cup final. And he was nominated for Vezina trophies here and there. He's a pretty darn good goaltender. Now, MacLean, it was weird as a stand-up goalie. Once the butterfly goalies became the dominant thing, there were I don't know if it was a hole in MacLean's game or what happened, but when he started to slip, that slip was kind of quick, and then he ended up being traded, and it was bizarre how quickly after the 94 Stanley Cup, most of that team is dismantled. I want to say by 97, most of those players were gone, and it was completely forgotten for the most part by Canuck fans, because they'd shipped everybody out, and we had Messier coming in and Keenan coming in, and it was kind of sort of a disaster from there. And that's when the Orca comes in too. So a lot of the dislike for the Orca, I think, was because of when it came in. I know for fans at the time, anyways, we weren't huge fans of the Orca in general. It's grown on me over the years. I'm fine with it, and there are killer whale tourist traps all over the place up the West Coast. So it is something that definitely works as representative of Vancouver. And there's native artwork all over the city. So on many levels, the logo totally works. But I really think it's because this was the 94 run. Anytime that they wear these, I know fans are reliving 94 when the Canucks do a throwback night to the skate. So, Kirk MacLean, big part of this becoming a very popular design with Canuck fans. Number 5. Yeah. During that 94 run, Jeff Courtnall went from one of my favorite players on the Canucks to probably my favorite player during that Stanley Cup run. We need a key goal. Get Courtnall on the ice. When I started to get really mad at the Canucks during the teardown of that 94 team was when Jeff Courtnall was allowed to walk. And I remember thinking, are you serious? Jeff Courtnall's gone. Awesome. And Cliff Running's gone? Great. Awesome. Could it be better? Oh, you've traded Linden. Yes, it can get better. It was stunning how quickly Courtnall went out. And on a related note, Marty Jelena gets honorable mention as well. Yeah, this is a tough list to get on. Very tough list to get on. Can't wait for all the people to skip to the end and say, what about this guy? And I'm doing as many honorable mentions as I can. So Jeff Courtnall at 5, one of those key guys for that 94 team that was fantastic. Honorable mention to Igor Larionov as well. Wasn't with the Canucks for a whole lot of years, but he was a key guy for Pavel when Pavel came in. I could have done a top 50 for the Canucks. I really could have. Okay, Courtnall. Number 4. Anybody who wanted Jelena, keep in mind he's in my Hall of Fame. Same with Tiger Williams. So they should be okay with this. Roberto Luongo. Luongo took a lot of flack in Vancouver. Now, his contract definitely made it easier to give him that flack. But the biggest failing with Luongo in his time here, I don't think was Luongo. I think it was when he would get off to a bad night, bad start, the Canucks never bailed him out. You look at some of the greats in the game and teams they've led to Stanley Cups. You can point to off nights they've had that their team bailed them out. It happened with Corey Crawford in Chicago. It happened with Marc-Andre Fleury in Pittsburgh. It is something that great teams do. And they say, all right, our starter's not having a great night. Come on, boys, we can do this. Vancouver, it just, I don't know what it was, but as soon as Luongo would allow like a couple of soft goals at the start of a game, whole team done. And Luongo was the best goaltender the Canucks ever had. Honorable mention to John Garrett on that note. I know John Garrett fans out there would be like, I thought he was the best goalie ever. He had one of the best masks ever. Also honorable mention to Jacob Markstrom. Markstrom is not on the list. I could have done 50. Absolutely could have done 50. So Luongo comes out at number 4. And his amazing run being what it was in 2011. The funny thing being, if the Canucks had managed to win in Game 7, Luongo likely wins the Conn Smythe, because he was so important in the victories. So even though Boston was tearing him apart in the losses, which again is an example of how the Canucks never bailed out their goaltender on a bad night, Luongo was the best player on the ice when they won. So he absolutely would have won the Conn Smythe that year had they actually managed to win Game 7. Number 3. Am I able to do 2 players together? Because if I'm not, that's going to make people mad. But I've got the Sabines at number 3. The Sabines had an amazing run as Vancouver Canucks. They were the face of the franchise. They're twins, so I could say face of the franchise, right? I know that there are differences between the two, and people can differentiate one from the other. I always had a problem with it. I really did. Like if I was out in public and I ran into a Sedin twin, I couldn't tell you whether it was Daniel or Henrik. I very, very unlikely I could, unless they were wearing their jersey, which would just be weird, wouldn't it? They've been retired for a while. So the Sedins, it's been a short period since they retired, but I do think that Canuck fans pretty much unanimously love what the Sedins did for the city, for the team, for how long they played. They gave it their all. So they definitely gave it their all. And again, if you're talking about people who've played for the Canucks that I'd love to have seen at least get a cup ring, the Sedins would be on that list. And even if it had meant they would have had to go somewhere else, even if they'd said, you know what, we'll go as rentals at the deadline to some other team, and then they win a Stanley Cup somewhere else, even if it had been Montreal, I still would have been happy for them. So the Sedins, absolutely respected by Vancouver fans. I know there's always going to be the detractors, but they did damn near everything they could, and they get my respect for that. Number 2, where it gets really difficult, kind of, sort of, but not really. Bo Horvat is my second favorite Canuck of all time. Captain Canuck, he may very well end up retiring as number 1. Bo Horvat, it's the hard work. It's the little bit of everything he does. It's the fact that he's kind of like, I want to say a Bergeron light. Just in that he does a little bit of everything, and there's enough of a defensive game there that you wonder if at some point he's going to get Selke consideration. Not yet. He's not in that category, but at some point could he? Maybe. The offensive side of things, he's probably a 60, 65 point guy, but could that develop further as he gets older? Sure. But yeah, Horvat, my second favorite Canuck, which means number one, which should not surprise anybody. Cliff Ronning. So, with all due respect to players like Brad Isbister and Adrian Plavsic and John Nemesnikov and Fedorov, Sergei Shirokov, Jesse Schultz, to these tremendous, fantastic legends who've played for the Vancouver Canucks, and don't forget Brandon Reed either. Cliff Ronning was my all-time favorite. Absolutely my all-time favorite. Not Steve Correa. Steve Correa was excellent as well, but Cliff Ronning. Not Darren Langdon. Not Troy Gamble. Cliff Ronning. So there you go. Honorable mention to Rich Sutter as well. And those are my all-time favorite Canucks. Top 15. And I will do this for other teams as well. It may be a challenge with some teams to come up with 15 names, but I don't think it will be. I really don't. Most of this was just off the top of my head because it's the Canucks. Other teams I may have to look through historical stuff online, but we'll get there. So there you go. Let me know your favorite Canucks in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.